April 8, 1943, 27,000 feet above France. The sky is a cold, pale blue, thin air biting at oxygen masks, the world below a patchwork of clouds and war. 8 P-47 Thunderbolts slice eastward, their radial engines thundering so loud the pilots can feel the vibration in their ribs. It's the 4th fighter group, on one of its first escort missions deep into German-held airspace. They've been told the new plane can keep up with the bombers. They haven't been told yet if it can survive the Luftwaffe. To the Germans watching from above, sleek Messerschmitt, Bf 109s and Focke-Wulf 190s, the P-47 looks like a bad joke. Too big, too heavy, a flying bathtub, some called it. Its broad wings and stubby frame seemed an insult to the refined aerodynamics of their own machines. The Luftwaffe pilots smirk through their goggles. Easy kills, they think. But inside those bulky cockpits sit men who've been through hell, veterans from Eagle Squadron, Americans who once fought under the RAF. They know fear, but they also know how to fight it. Lieutenant Francis, Gabby, Gabreski, glances at his instruments. Oil pressure steady, turbine temperature climbing. He feels the heavy torque of the Pratt Whitney R-2800 double wasp engine, a monster of a machine that could haul the Thunderbolt through the sky like a cannonball with wings. Bogies, 11 o'clock high. The call cuts through static. The Luftwaffe dives first, sunlight flashing off polished aluminum. The Thunderbolts hold formation, not nimble enough to twist away, but built strong enough to take the hit. Rounds rake through the formation, one P-47 limps, trailing smoke. Gabreski dives, flips the bird's nose down, and punches the throttle open. The roar deepens to a growl. The Germans don't expect it, that a jug this heavy could dive faster than a bullet. The P-47 plunges like a meteor, and for the first time, the Luftwaffe realizes, this thing doesn't fly like it looks. In the early months of 1943, Allied pilots weren't laughing. They were dying. The P-47 Thunderbolt, newly introduced to the European theatre, faced skepticism from every corner. Ground crews cursed its weight. Pilots complained about its sluggish climb. Newspapers back home called it a disappointment with wings. The Germans had reason to feel smug. For 3 years, the Luftwaffe had ruled the air, from Poland to the Channel. The WWII had ripped through RAF Spitfires with terrifying efficiency. To them, the American entry, this obese, lumbering brute, looked like a step backward. Luftwaffe training manuals even mocked it. Large, slow, and easy to spot. Avoid close dogfights, strike from above. But what the Germans didn't see was what the P-47 was built for. It wasn't designed to dance. It was designed to survive and to kill at speed. Its thick armor plating could shrug off 20mm cannon shells. Its engine, air-cooled instead of liquid-cooled, could take a hit and keep turning. And when that big turbocharger kicked in above 20,000 feet, the Thunderbolt became something new entirely, an unstoppable sledgehammer in the thin air. Gabreski and his squadron learned to trust that weight, to dive instead of turn, to strike once and vanish into the clouds. They began to rewrite the manual, not through theory, but through fire. Each mission taught them something the designers couldn't. Each dead comrade wrote another line of the doctrine that would, in time, break the Luftwaffe's spine. By summer, laughter in German radio chatter had grown thin. Pilots began to ask questions. What are these new Thunderbolts doing over Hanover? Why aren't they falling behind? The jokes faded. Fear, quiet and unfamiliar, began to replace it. The first true test came over Rouen, May 15th, 1943. The target, rail yards feeding German armour toward the Atlantic coast. The Luftwaffe sent everything it had. FW-190s diving out of the sun. Messerschmitts streaking in from cloud cover, confident in the kill. Captain Don Blakeslee, a man who'd fought the Battle of Britain under the RAF, leads his squadron in tight formation. The Thunderbolt isn't built for elegance. It howls. It trembles. But in that trembling is raw power. power the Luftwaffe hasn't yet met. Bandits, 2 o'clock, closing fast. Blakeslee banks hard. The controls are heavy, sluggish compared to a Spitfire, but the plane holds. His 6.50 caliber machine guns open up. A solid wall of fire, nearly 100 rounds per second. A Messerschmitt slices through, banking up to escape. But the P-47 doesn't break. It dives, brutally, straight down through cloud and chaos. The German follows, confident. That's when the Thunderbolt shows its teeth. In a dive, gravity becomes its ally. The weight that mocked it on takeoff now pulls it faster than any propeller-driven fighter in the war. The German can't keep up. The engine screams, the wings quiver, and then the P-47 pulls up, leaving the Messerschmitt to disintegrate into the valley below. For Blakeslee's men, it's revelation through combat. The P-47's limits aren't where they thought they were. Each dive, each gun run, rewrites their instincts. By day's end, they've downed 4 enemy aircraft, at the cost of 1 Thunderbolt that limped home with holes big enough to see daylight through. The pilot survived. When the squadron lands, the mechanics gather around the battered P-47, eyes wide. One tech runs his hand over the torn fuselage. "God damn," he mutters. "It's like it chewed the bullets up and spit 'em out." The laughter from the Luftwaffe would last a few more weeks. After Rouen, no one in the 8th Air Force was laughing either. They were believers now, believers in the ugly, unstoppable jug. By midsummer 1943, a quiet transformation is underway. In hangars across England, engineers from Republic Aviation walk among the squadrons, clipboards in hand, listening. Every complaint, every field fix, every swear from a pilot becomes data for survival. They know the Thunderbolt is heavy, but they also know why. That huge Pratt Whitney R-2800 engine, air-cooled and turbocharged, gives it unmatched resilience at altitude, while the Luftwaffe's liquid-cooled Daimler-Benz engines seize or burst when hit. The Thunderbolts just coughs smoke and keeps turning. The key lies behind the cockpit. The turbo supercharger assembly, a labyrinth of ducts and steel the size of a small car. It channels exhaust gases into a spinning turbine, forcing dense air back into the engine. The result, full power above 30,000 feet, a place where most German planes wheeze for oxygen. That meant the Thunderbolt could fight where the bombers flew, high, cold, and thin. To the 8th Air Force, that was salvation. Until then, flying fortresses had flown nearly unprotected over Europe. German interceptors tore into them, day after day, confident no Allied fighter could escort them all the way. The Thunderbolt changed that equation. Soon, P-47s begin pushing deeper into German airspace. Pilots test their range, carrying drop tanks under their wings, trading weight for reach. Every mission stretches them further toward the heart of the Reich. Still, the Germans mock. Their radio operators call it the P-47 washing machine because of the deep, rolling rumble of its engine. But the joke's getting nervous. Those washing machines are starting to leave vapor trails over Berlin, and for every Luftwaffe ace who dives down on a Thunderbolt, another learns, too late, that what looks like a target can also be a trap. The tide isn't turning yet, but in the sound of that distant thunder, you can hear it coming. June 1943. The English coast disappears behind the formation, grey cliffs fading into mist. 24 Thunderbolts from the 56 Fighter Group fly east, their bellies heavy with fuel tanks. Their mission, to protect a formation of B-17s striking the steel mills of Lille. Each pilot knows the odds. Every mission beyond the French coast means a gauntlet of flak, fighters, and fuel calculations that never quite add up. One mistake, one dogfight too far from home, and the channel becomes their grave. The Luftwaffe greets them above the target. 30 FW-190s climbing hard through the haze. The German pilots are seasoned, most wear the black and white scarf of veterans from the Eastern Front. They've faced Yak-9s, LA-5s, Spitfires, but never these hulking American beasts. Captain Walker, Bud Mahurin, leads his flight through the first attack. His voice is steady, clipped. Stay tight, keep your altitude. His wingman, a young lieutenant on his 5th mission, fights the instinct to turn. The Thunderbolt doesn't turn, it strikes. A 190 swings behind them, cannons flashing. The rounds hit, but the armor holds. Mahurin yanks the stick, throttles down, and flips the plane into a controlled dive. The German follows, hungry for the kill. At 25,000 feet, the P-47 begins to accelerate. At 20,000, it's unstoppable. By 15,000, the German realizes the mistake. The Thunderbolt dives past 480 miles per hour. No plane in the world can follow. Mahurin levels out, climbs back, and comes up under the German's tail. One burst, 6 Brownings spit fire. The 190 shatters into dust. Back at base, Mahurin's flight returns with 3 kills and 2 damaged. One man doesn't make it, fuel gone, ditched in the channel. But the Luftwaffe loses 5. That night, German intelligence notes a worrying pattern. The Jug can dive faster than anything they have. They mark it in red ink, a small, bureaucratic acknowledgement of fear. The men who flew that mission don't read the report. They just know they're starting to punch back. By August 1943, a new breed of American pilot is forming. Part warrior, part mechanic, part myth. They're the Jugmen, named after the plane they curse, love, and fly into hell. The 56th Fighter Group, the Zemke's Wolfpack, becomes the proving ground. Colonel Hubert Zemke, calm and calculating, teaches his men to turn the Thunderbolt's flaws into tactics. You don't outturn the Hun, he says. You outthink him. Under Zemke's doctrine, the P-47 becomes an ambush predator. They climb high, wait for the Germans to rise, then dive like a hammer from the clouds. No mercy, no chivalry, strike once, vanish, survive. Gabreski masters it. Robert Johnson, too. Both men will become legends. Johnson's story spreads like wildfire. His Thunderbolt hit more than 200 times by cannon and machine gun fire. Canopy jammed, controls shredded. He flies it home. When ground crew count the holes, they stop at 200 and still miss some. The plane had flown back on courage alone. That story changes everything. The pilots stop mocking the Jug. They start painting names on her sides. Spirit of Atlantic City, Lucky Penguin, Miss Fireball. Each name a promise, a superstition, a dare to fate. Zemke's Wolfpack scores kill after kill. The Luftwaffe still wins many days, but the tide of confidence is shifting. German pilots, once eager to engage, now think twice when they see the broad wings and blunt nose of a P-47 glinting in the sun. The Americans know they've earned that fear. The Jug isn't elegant, it's not graceful, but in a war of attrition, it's the one plane that seems to want to live as badly as the men inside it. And soon, living won't be enough. Soon, the Jug will learn to kill with purpose. October 14th, 1943, the second raid on Schweinfurt, a date that would live in infamy for the men of the 8th Air Force. The target, Germany's ball-bearing factories, lifeblood of its armoured divisions. The threat, every fighter the Luftwaffe can scramble. At dawn, 291 B-17s lift off from English fields, escorting them, a thin screen of P-47s, barely able to cover half the route before fuel runs dry. The math is brutal. Beyond the Rhine, the bombers will be alone. For the first hours, the air war plays out as expected. The Jugs fend off the first waves, hammering 109s and 190s in tight, thundering dogfights. Then the fuel gauges begin to drop. At the radio command, Thunderbolts return to base, the bombers' hearts sink. From here on, the fortresses will fly naked. But a handful of P-47 pilots, men like Fred Christensen and Gabreski, ignore the call. They push on, past the point of no return. Just one more run, Gabreski mutters. His wingman doesn't argue. Above Schweinfurt, chaos reigns. Flak bursts bloom like black flowers. German fighters tear into the bomber stream. The sky is filled with burning aluminum and falling parachutes. Gabreski dives through it all, guns blazing, slicing into an FW-190 just as it rolls toward a B-17. The German explodes mid-turn. He looks down and sees the bomber limp away, engines coughing smoke, but still flying. Moments later, his own fuel warning light begins to blink. They're out too far, but they keep going. One more escort run. One more dying fortress that doesn't die. When the P-47s finally turn west, their tanks dry, they glide on prayer and fumes. Half of them land in England with empty gauges. A few ditch in the Channel. But in Schweinfurt, the Germans learn something. Even outnumbered, even dying on fuel, these bathtubs fight like mad dogs. The Americans lose 60 bombers that day, but the Luftwaffe loses something else, its sense of invincibility. The Schweinfurt raid exposed a brutal truth. Power was nothing without range. The P-47 could fight. It could kill, but it couldn't stay long enough to finish the job. Republic's engineers go to work. They stretch the limits of what the Thunderbolt can carry. First come the 75-gallon drop tanks, crude, jettisonable barrels slung under each wing. Then, the 108-gallon models. Pilots joke they're flying with beer kegs strapped to their bellies, but those kegs mean life. With the new tanks, the P-47 can push farther, deeper into the heart of Germany. By early 1944, Thunderbolts are escorting bombers to Frankfurt, Hanover, even Berlin itself. The Luftwaffe is no longer laughing. They begin to realize the Americans are solving problems faster than they can exploit them. To counter, German pilots switch tactics, head-on attacks, fast slashing runs, breakaways before the jugs can dive. But the Americans adapt again. They start flying fighter sweeps ahead of bomber formations, hunting the hunters. And the P-47, once a defensive wall, becomes a weapon of pursuit. Ground crews modify the engines, fine-tune the turbos, shave seconds off, climb times. Pilots learn to wring every ounce of energy from the big radial engines. Soon, the Thunderbolt can climb faster than the 190s it once feared. In hangars, mechanics pin up photographs of their kills. Tails of Messerschmitts painted red, Focke-Wulfs reduced to ash. Each photograph, a piece of evidence. The joke's over. The jug has become something terrifying. Not the clumsy brute the Luftwaffe mocked, but a relentless machine of retribution. Above the smoke and cloud, it's no longer the German pilots who decide when to fight. It's the Thunderbolt. January 1944. The Allied air war has reached a fever pitch. Every day, waves of B-17s and B-24s thunder eastward from England. Behind and above them, the silver shadows of Thunderbolts keep watch. By now, the Luftwaffe is bleeding. Their seasoned aces, men who once mocked the American pilots, are gone, replaced by boys barely out of training. The old hands who survived Stalingrad and the Channel now face a new kind of enemy, one they can't shake, outrun, or outlast. Over Osnabrück, Gabreski leads his flight into a storm of vapor trails. "Tally-ho, 11 high," he calls, and the formation splits. 6 P-47s dive, 6 silver fists through a sky smeared with exhaust and fire. Below, a swarm of WWIIs rise to meet them. The Germans are disciplined, determined, but they were out of time. Every one of them knows the Reich cities burn nightly now, and every bomber that gets through is another nail in Germany's coffin. The battle lasts 11 minutes. The jugs tear through the formation. Their 6 50-caliber guns hosing down the sky. In the radio static, voices crackle. Splash 1, splash 2. When the smoke clears, 4 Thunderbolts are hit, but they all return. 12 German fighters do not. Later that night, Gabreski writes in his logbook, "They thought we were too heavy to climb. Turns out we were just too heavy to kill." Across Germany, morale fractures. Civilians watch daylight raids with a sense of inevitability. The Luftwaffe still fights with courage, but it's no longer a duel. It's survival. From this point forward, the air war belongs to the jug, and to the men who refuse to let its size define its soul. The sky has turned, and from its high, frozen edge, thunder rolls towards the heart of the Reich. Spring 1944. The P-47's mission changes forever. No longer content with escorting bombers, the 8th and 9th Air Forces unleash their Thunderbolts on the ground. Fighter bomber. The phrase barely captures what's coming. The Thunderbolt's 8 machine guns, already the heaviest armament of any Allied fighter, are joined by bombs and rockets. The same brute strength that let it dive faster than gravity now gives it stability under fire. Its new job, to destroy Germany's ability to fight on the ground. Trains, trucks, convoys, anything that moves. At first, the Luftwaffe doesn't understand what's happening. Their airfields begin erupting in flame at dawn. Fuel trucks, ammunition depots, hangars turned to rubble. Thunderbolts come in low, fast, screaming out of nowhere. They don't linger. They strike and vanish into the horizon. For the German soldiers below, the sound of that radial engine becomes a kind of terror. They call it der Donnerschlag, the thunderclap. For the first time since 1939, the Reich's ground troops fear the sky. Gabreski's squadron leads these rhubarb missions with ruthless precision. They come home filthy, half-deaf from engine roar, but alive. Each sortie weakens Germany's front. Bridges gone, trains destroyed, supplies lost, and for the Luftwaffe, another nightmare begins. Every time they scramble to intercept, they lose more aircraft than they destroy. Fighter Command orders them to conserve fuel. Soon, many German airfields lie empty, their aircraft hidden under camouflage nets. The hunters, once proud eagles of the Reich, now hide from the jug-shaped ghosts above. The irony isn't lost on the Americans. The same men who were mocked for flying a flying milk jug now own the European sky and every road beneath it. Summer 1944. France burns under liberation. The Allies are ashore in Normandy, and the P-47 now fights lower than ever, strafing convoys, smashing bridges, guarding the roads where German armor once ruled. Francis Gabreski leads from the front. By July, he's the highest-scoring American ace in the European theater. But he isn't counting kills anymore. He's counting the days until it ends. On July 20th, his squadron attacks a German airfield near Bassenheim. The smoke is thick, the flak savage. Gabreski dives through it, picks out a line of parked FW-190s, and releases his bombs. The runway erupts in flame. Pulling out, he feels the stick shudder, a faint tremor, then a grind. Something's wrong. His propeller blades bite air unevenly. He's hit. Gabreski climbs, searching for friendly lines, but the engine coughs, sputters. He can't make it back. He skims the treetops, looking for a clearing, any place to land. The jug slides in hard, breaks its gear, and skids through a hedgerow. Silence follows, then the faint ticking of cooling metal. Gabreski crawls out, his uniform torn, his hands bleeding. He's only a few miles from Allied territory, but he never makes it. German patrols close in. For the ace who had mocked his death 100 times, the war pauses here, in a field of crushed grass and blackened smoke. Captured, he spends the rest of the war in Stalag Luftwaffe, a prisoner watching his comrades finish the fight he helped start. Word of his capture spreads across England like thunder. Pilots hang his photo in ready rooms. Mechanics chalk "For Gabby" onto the sides of their jugs. His legacy becomes fuel, not just for vengeance, but for endurance. The P-47 doesn't slow down. If anything, it grows more ferocious. Every sortie now carries a quiet promise for the ones who didn't come home. August 1944. The Allied armies are racing across France, and the Thunderbolt has become the spearhead's shadow. Low-altitude operations, the kind of missions pilots once dreaded, are now the jug's daily bread. Columns of German armor retreat east, and every road, every rail line becomes a hunting ground. The pilots fly so low they can see faces. Farmers dive into ditches as silver wings roar overhead. Trains explode under rocket fire, each detonation sending shockwaves through the cabins. It's not glamorous work. It's dirty, brutal, and unforgiving. One mistake, one missed flak burst, and a pilot disappears in a ball of flame. But this is where the Thunderbolt shines. Its thick armor saves lives that any other fighter would have lost. Pilots return with holes big enough to crawl through, their planes coughing oil and smoke, but still flying. In the 9th Air Force, pilots like Glenn Eagleston and Dave Schilling push the P-47 to its limit. Schilling's men joke that if you can see the mud on your wings, you're flying the right altitude. They attack anything that moves: trucks, locomotives, half-tracks, leaving black scars on the landscape of retreat. German soldiers begin calling the Jog der Schlachthammer, the battle hammer. By autumn, the Luftwaffe's ability to defend its own ground forces is collapsing. Every attempt to regroup ends in smoke and ruin. What began as a defensive escort fighter has become a weapon of annihilation, an airborne hammer, driving the nails into the Reich's coffin. The sound of those engines, that heavy, rolling thunder, echoes from Normandy to the Ardennes, and the Germans who once laughed at the jug now pray never to hear it again. December 1944. The Ardennes. Snow muffles the land, the forests thick with fog and silence. Then, suddenly, that silence breaks. Engines, artillery, and the rising chaos of Hitler's final gamble. The Battle of the Bulge erupts like a wound reopened. For the men in the trees below, the sky has vanished behind cloud and storm. For the pilots above, it's worse. They're grounded. For days, the weather pins the Thunderbolts to their airfields. The Luftwaffe strikes hard, columns of panzers pushing west, cutting American lines, slaughtering convoys. The jugs sit idle, their wings frozen with ice, their pilots pacing in frustration. Then, on December 23rd, the clouds finally break. The pilots don't wait for orders. They take off the moment visibility clears, alone, in pairs, by squadrons, a tidal wave of silver thundering into the white sky. Below them, the Ardennes burns. The Thunderbolts fan out, sweeping over roads jammed with German armor and trucks. The first rocket salvo slams into a Tiger tank, flipping it like a toy. Columns scatter, soldiers running for cover, but the jugs circle back, again and again. The Luftwaffe tries to intervene, but what's left of it is a shadow. The few 109s that rise into the air are torn apart by swarms of P-47s, now fighting, with decades of anger in their hearts. For the men on the ground, the freezing, desperate Americans holding the line at Bastogne, the sudden roar above them is salvation. They look up and see black smoke and silver wings and know they're not alone. By New Year's, the bulge is collapsing. The Thunderbolts have shattered the German offensive, burning thousands of vehicles and cutting their supply arteries in half. When the smoke clears, the forests are littered with the remains of tanks. And the myth of the Luftwaffe is buried beneath them. The jug had come full circle, mocked for its bulk, feared for its power, and now, by sheer force of will, the saviour of the Western Front. Early 1945. Germany is dying, city by city, mile by mile. The Thunderbolt now roams almost uncontested. Its pilots wake to missions that sound less like war and more like extermination. Destroy everything that moves east of the Rhine. Rail lines vanish beneath their rockets. Bridges crumble. Refugee columns. Military convoys. Fuel depots. All targets now, indistinguishable in the madness of retreat. The Luftwaffe throws its last strength into the sky. Desperate sorties by boys who barely know how to fly. The Americans see them coming and feel no triumph, only grim inevitability. These are not battles anymore, they're executions. At 20,000 feet over the shattered remains of Cologne, a flight of P-47s meets a dozen FW-190s. The fight lasts 5 minutes. 11 German planes fall. One Thunderbolt returns home, leaking oil but intact. Below, the city smoulders, a ghost of concrete and ash. For pilots like Dave Schilling, the war becomes mechanical, a outsized rhythm of takeoff, destroy, return, repeat. The laughter and rivalry are gone now, replaced by fatigue and reflection. They've seen too many empty bunks, too many letters waiting on tables no one will read again, but they keep flying, because the faster they destroy, the sooner it ends. By March, the Rhine crossings begin. The jug pilots fly ahead of Patton's tanks, smashing anything that dares to move. Germany's roads become graveyards of armour, and for the few Luftwaffe squadrons still in the air, the nightmare is endless. hunted from takeoff to crash site. The Jug's roar, once mocked across Europe, now echoes as the sound of final judgment. The thunder that once rumbled on the edge of battle now rolls endlessly across a defeated land. The Reich is cracking, and the men in those cockpits, exhausted, hollow-eyed, unbreakable, can almost see the end. March 1940. Germany's once proud Luftwaffe is a shadow of its former self. Airfields lie in ruins, supply lines are shattered, and the last squadrons scramble from makeshift strips carved into forests and meadows. Yet still, they rise, a handful of fighters, against the inevitable. From bases in France and Belgium, Thunderbolts take off before dawn. Their mission: sweep the skies, annihilate what remains. The war is nearly over, but the dying is not. Over Kassel, the last real dogfights of the European war unfold. A flight of P-47s under Lieutenant Colonel Dave Schilling encounters a formation of Mi-262 jets, sleek, silver, and impossibly fast. The German pilots hope the new jet fighter will turn the tide. For a brief, fleeting moment, it almost does. The Mi-262s slice through the formation, cannons blazing. 2 Thunderbolts go down in flames. But as the Germans circle for another pass, the Jugs pounce when the jets slow to land. 8 P-47s dive from the clouds, catching them over the runway. In seconds, the airfield becomes an inferno, the last dream of Luftwaffe superiority burning in its own hangars. Schilling's flight returns home, silent. They know the war is ending, but none of them cheer. For every victory, there's another empty cot. Across Germany, the few surviving Luftwaffe pilots write farewell letters, some confessing regret, others vowing defiance until the end. Many never get to send them. When the next dawn comes, there are no interceptors left. For the first time in 6 years, the sky over Europe belongs entirely to the enemy, to the Jug, to the Mustang, to the Liberator. The last stand of the Luftwaffe is not a battle. It's a funeral, lit by the flames of its own pride. April 1945. The war is collapsing, but death has momentum. The P-47s now range from the Rhine to the Elbe, hunting pockets of resistance and convoys of refugees tangled in retreat. It's a new kind of mission, one that weighs heavy on the men flying it. Through their gun sights, they can no longer tell who's fighting and who's fleeing. But orders are clear. Destroy anything that moves. Cut off the German army's escape. Captain George Bostwick recalls one morning outside Magdeburg. His flight finds a column of trucks. No markings, no escort. They dive in. Rockets streak out. Explosions ripple through the line. Then he sees them. Women, children, civilians mixed with soldiers. The convoy disintegrates in horror. Bostwick climbs back into cloud cover, silent. Over the radio, no one speaks for a long time. It's not the first mistake, and it won't be the last. In mess halls and tents, the pilots stop boasting about kills. They drink more quietly. The Jug, once a symbol of pride, now feels like a burden they can't put down. They've done their job too well. There are no Luftwaffe aces left to chase. No glory left in burning the ruins of a dying nation. Only the knowledge that this, all of it, had to happen for the war to end. And still, they fly, because the mission continues until someone tells them to stop. On April 25th, the Thunderbolts strike near the Elbe for the last time. When they return, black with soot and oil, a radio operator delivers the news. Hitler is dead. No cheers, no celebration. Just the quiet hum of cooling engines and the faint, endless echo of thunder fading into peace. May 8th, 1945. Victory in Europe Day. The guns fall silent. Across the continent, the air smells of smoke, spring, and something like disbelief. The P-47s that once darkened the skies now sit motionless on muddy airfields. Wings streaked with oil, bomb racks empty. Mechanics wander among them with the dazed looks of men who have forgotten what quiet sounds like. For the pilots, the silence is harder than the noise. They had lived by rhythm, mission briefings, engine roar, the crack of gunfire, the long glide home. Now there's only stillness. Lieutenant Bud Mahurin walks the line of Jugs at Boxted Airfield, running his hand along the dented fuselage of his old aircraft. The metal is warm from the sun, not from battle. A few miles away, Robert Johnson receives word that he's going home. He sits in the mess tent, staring at his coffee. Around him, laughter flickers and fades. No one knows what to do with peace. The Luftwaffe, once so proud, lies in fragments, its aces dead or prisoners, its airfields rubble. And yet, there's no triumph here, only exhaustion. The P-47 pilots talk about the ones who didn't come back. They remember Gabreski, still behind barbed wire in a German camp, unaware that the war he helped win is finally over. At dusk, a ground crewman climbs into a Thunderbolt's cockpit and starts the engine one last time. The deep, rolling growl fills the airfield, the familiar heartbeat of years gone by. For a moment, every head turns. Then the sound dies. The jug, the flying anvil, the brute that once carried an air force on its shoulders, has nothing left to kill. It will be months before the men realize what they've done, that they've buried an empire beneath the thunder. For now, they simply sit and listen to the quiet, as if unsure the world can really stay that way. Summer 1945. As Europe rebuilds, the Thunderbolt's role begins to fade. The P-51 Mustang takes its place in headlines, sleek and graceful, the poster child of victory. But among the men who fought the long war, there's no forgetting which plane held the line when no other could. At American air bases, hundreds of jugs line up for storage, their paint sun-faded, their gun barrels rusting. Some are scrapped for metal, others are sold to foreign air forces. Pilots watch as bulldozers push them aside like relics. A few shake their heads, most stay silent. But history doesn't forget. In squadron bars and veterans' halls, stories of the jug still echo, of bullet-riddled engines that refused to quit, of dives so steep the wings screamed, of men who returned on courage alone. Gabreski comes home from captivity that August. When he steps onto the tarmac at Mitchell Field, the first thing he does is walk up to a P-47 and touch the fuselage. Reporters ask him what he thinks of the new Mustangs. He smiles and says softly, "They're fine, but they never took me home through flak." The Thunderbolt becomes more than a machine. It becomes a symbol of stubbornness, of resilience, of the kind of strength that doesn't need to look beautiful to be powerful. In the years to come, when the world speaks of the air war, they'll remember the speed of the Spitfire, the reach of the Mustang, the grace of the Messerschmitt. But the men who lived it will remember the sound, that deep, relentless growl of the jug, carving through the clouds, unkillable, unstoppable, utterly American. The plane that was mocked at birth had outflown every insult, and in doing so, it became something immortal. Year 1946. The war is over, but echoes of it linger in the air. Across Europe, wrecks of Thunderbolts rust in meadows, their wings folded into the soil that freedom reclaimed. Children climb through empty cockpits. Farmers plow around their remains, leaving twisted metal where once there had been fire and fury. In America, parades fill the streets, brass bands, banners, smiling faces. But for the pilots who flew the jug, something about peace feels foreign. The sky, once alive with purpose, now seems too quiet. Francis Gabreski tours the country, giving speeches about resilience and courage. Yet when he speaks of victory, his voice softens at the edges. "We didn't win because we were fearless," he tells a crowd in Chicago. "We won because we learned how to fly afraid." In hangars, the last Thunderbolts await their fate. A few are refitted for peacetime service, training aircraft, weather reconnaissance, even air races. Most are dismantled, their mighty Pratt Whitney engines are salvaged, their armor melted down to feed the industry of peace. But among veterans, the jug never fades. In the quiet of American Legion halls, stories circulate like gospel. Johnson's bullet-riddled return, Mahurin's dives, the Wolfpack's sky duels over France. They speak of the smell, cordite, oil, and ozone, the sound of a radial engine spooling up, the vibration that reached your bones before you even left the ground. For them, the jug isn't just an aircraft, it's memory-made metal, the sound of homecoming and loss, of men who defied mockery and survived by grit alone. And though the P-47 will never again darken a wartime sky, its spirit remains in every pilot who learned that strength isn't about grace, it's about endurance, and faith that no matter how heavy you are, you can still rise. 2 decades later, a reunion is held in Dayton, Ohio. Old men with silver hair and faded squadron patches gather beside a single restored Thunderbolt, its fuselage gleaming under museum lights. They stand in silence for a long time, each lost in his own memories. The laughter comes eventually, stories of botched landings, near misses, and the smell of English mud, but beneath it all lies reverence. A Luftwaffe veteran, invited as a guest, walks slowly around the jug. He lays a hand on the metal skin and nods. "We called it ugly," he says softly, his German accent still sharp. "We stopped laughing in 44. No one answers. They don't need to, because every man in that hangar remembers what it felt like. To see the sun glint off that broad wing, to hear the roar of the double wasp echo through the clouds, to know that in those moments, the war was decided not by beauty, but by will. The P-47. Thunderbolt wasn't the fastest, or the sleekest, or the most celebrated, but it was the one that never quit, the one that dived into hell and came out roaring, the one that turned mockery into fear, and fear into victory. As the lights dim, the veterans raise their glasses, to the men who flew her, to the ones who didn't come back, and to the brute that carried them home. And as the old engine starts one last time, the hangar fills with that deep, unmistakable rumble, the voice of the jug. The laughter that once followed it has long since died. Only thunder remains,